A hush fell over the corridor, broken only by the sharp laughter of a group of students clustered near the lockers. At the center of their attention stood a woman whose presence seemed to challenge the very air around her. Imani Walker, the new teacher, stood tall, her eyes steady, her posture unyielding. The hallway, usually a blur of movement and chatter, had become a stage for confrontation. Jeers echoed off the walls, each one a test, each one daring her to flinch. One student, emboldened by the crowd, stepped forward, his words laced with mockery. The tension in the air was undeniable. Every gaze was fixed on Imani, waiting to see if she would break or stand her ground. Have you ever found yourself surrounded by people who doubted you, not because of your abilities, but because of who you are? Have you ever walked into a room and felt the weight of every stare, every whispered comment, every expectation that you would fail? Maybe it was your first day at a new job, or the moment you spoke up in a meeting, or the time you stood alone in a crowd that didn't want you there. If you've ever felt outnumbered, underestimated, or forced to prove your worth, you know the pressure that can build in moments like these. You know how it feels when silence is just as loud as the insults. This isn't just a story about a teacher and her students. It's about the silent battles fought in hallways and classrooms, in offices and neighborhoods every single day. It's about the way bullying and prejudice can seep into the smallest interactions, a smirk, a dismissive glance, a joke that cuts deeper than it seems. It's about the pressure to shrink yourself, to fit in, to let others define your limits. For Imani, every step down that hallway was a challenge, not just to her authority, but to her very identity. The laughter wasn't just noise, it was a message. You don't belong here. But what if belonging isn't something you're given? What if it's something you claim, even when the world tries to push you out? What if the person everyone expects to fold under pressure is carrying a strength no one can see? What if the quietest person in the room is the one who's been preparing for this moment her entire life? Stay with me, because what unfolds in this story isn't just about standing up to bullies. It's about the kind of power that comes from years of discipline, from lessons learned in places most people never see. There's a secret Imani carries, one that will turn the tables in ways no one expects. If you've ever witnessed or experienced injustice, whether in a school, at work, or anywhere else, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters, and together, we can shine a light on the moments that too often go unseen. Long before Imani Walker ever set foot in a classroom as a teacher, her world was shaped by the pulse of a city that never truly slept. She grew up in a neighborhood where laughter and hardship lived side by side. The streets were alive with music, the scent of home-cooked meals, and the constant hum of neighbors looking out for one another. Yet, beneath the surface, there were daily reminders that life here demanded more than just hope. It demanded grit. Imani's mother worked double shifts at the local hospital. Her father fixed cars in a garage that doubled as a community hangout. But it was her grandmother, Miss Ruth, who became the anchor in Imani's life. Miss Ruth's tiny apartment was filled with books, family photos, and the aroma of simmering stew. She believed in the power of words and the strength of tradition. Every evening, she would gather Imani close and share stories, some about ancestors who had fought for dignity, others about the importance of standing tall even when the world tried to bend you. Miss Ruth's voice was gentle but firm. Knowledge and strength go hand in hand, she would say, her eyes shining with conviction. When you feed your mind, you feed your spirit. When you stand up for yourself, you stand up for everyone who came before you. These lessons weren't just words. They were a call to action. Imani learned early that her family's history was filled with people who refused to be defined by their circumstances. On weekends, Miss Ruth would take Imani to the library, where they'd lose themselves in stories of inventors, poets, and leaders who looked like them. At home, she taught Imani how to cook, how to sew, and how to listen, really listen, to the people around her. These moments became the foundation of Imani's character, a blend of curiosity, compassion, and quiet determination. But life outside Miss Ruth's apartment was not always kind. Imani's first taste of injustice came at the age of 10, when a group of older kids cornered her on the way home from school. Their words stung, but it was the feeling of helplessness that lingered long after. That night, Imani sat at the kitchen table, her fists clenched, her eyes brimming with tears. Miss Ruth didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, she placed a hand on Imani's shoulder and said, "You can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. Find your center, and nothing can shake you." A week later, Miss Ruth enrolled Imani in a local karate class. The dojo was a world apart from the chaos outside. The air was filled with the sound of feet moving in unison, the sharp snap of uniforms, and the calm authority of the instructor, Master Kwame. He welcomed Imani with a nod, recognizing in her the same hunger for strength he'd seen in so many before. Karate was more than just kicks and punches. It was a discipline that demanded respect for oneself and for others. Master Kwame taught Imani that true power came from within. Each lesson was a test, not just of skill, but of patience and focus. When Imani stumbled, he encouraged her to get back up. When she succeeded, he reminded her that humility was just as important as victory. The dojo became a second home. Imani found herself drawn to the rituals, the bow at the door, the silent moments before practice, the way everyone moved as one. She learned to breathe through frustration, to channel her energy, and to trust her instincts. The lessons she absorbed on the mat began to shape her approach to every challenge she faced outside its walls. As Imani grew, so did her sense of purpose. She excelled in school, driven by a desire to honor her grandmother's sacrifices and to prove, most of all to herself, that she could rise above any obstacle. The combination of academic achievement and martial discipline set her apart. Teachers noticed her focus, classmates admired her quiet confidence. By the time she reached high school, Imani knew she wanted to give back. She saw how education could open doors, how a single act of kindness or courage could ripple through a community. The seeds of her mission were planted, to become a teacher who would not only impart knowledge but also inspire strength in others. The morning sun glinted off the polished windows of Jefferson Heights Academy as Imani approached the entrance, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and apprehension. The school's reputation for academic excellence was well known, but so was its history of sameness. As she stepped through the doors, the familiar scent of floor wax and fresh paper greeted her, but so did the curious stares. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, each one a reminder that she was stepping into a world where she would stand out, not just for her talent, but for her very presence. Imani's first day was a blur of introductions and orientation meetings. The principal, Mr. Carter, greeted her with a practiced smile, his handshake firm, but his eyes flickering with something unreadable. "We're glad to have you here," he said, but the words felt rehearsed, as if he were reading from a script. In the staff lounge, conversations paused as she entered. Some teachers offered polite greetings, but their questions about her background and teaching style carried an undercurrent of skepticism. A few exchanged glances, their smiles tight, their words carefully chosen. It didn't take long for Imani to notice the small ways she was set apart. During her first faculty meeting, a colleague leaned over and whispered, "You must be so excited to bring some new energy to our school." The compliment was laced with expectation, as if her role was to be a novelty rather than a peer. In the hallway, a group of students snickered as she passed, their eyes lingering a little too long. At lunch, she overheard a parent in the office say, "I hope she can handle our kids. They're not used to different approaches." The microaggressions were sometimes so subtle they could almost be dismissed: a raised eyebrow, a question about her credentials, a joke about her unconventional methods. But there were moments when the hostility was unmistakable. One afternoon, as she prepared her classroom, she found a note on her desk: "Don't try to change things." The message wasn't signed, but its intent was clear. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of being the only black teacher in the building grew heavier. Imani felt the pressure to represent, to excel, to never show weakness. Every lesson plan, every interaction, every decision was scrutinized. She became hyper-aware of her words and actions, knowing that any misstep would be magnified. The isolation seeped into her evenings. After school, she would sit alone in her apartment, replaying conversations and second-guessing her choices. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the city outside her window. She missed the comfort of her grandmother's kitchen, the camaraderie of the dojo, the feeling of belonging. Here, she was surrounded by people, yet she had never felt more alone. Imani kept a journal, filling its pages with her frustrations and fears. She wrote about the exhaustion of always having to prove herself, the sting of being overlooked, the ache of missing home. Yet, even in her lowest moments, she clung to the lessons of her childhood, resilience, dignity, and the belief that she was meant for more than just survival. Despite the challenges, Imani refused to shrink. She decorated her classroom with quotes from Black authors and activists, determined to create a space where every student could see themselves reflected. She greeted each child by name, learned their stories, and listened with genuine interest. Slowly, a few students began to open up, drawn to her warmth and authenticity. There were setbacks, days when the stares felt sharper, when the whispers grew louder. But there were also small victories, a student who stayed after class to ask for advice, a colleague who offered a word of encouragement, a parent who thanked her for making their child feel seen. These moments, though fleeting, reminded Imani that change often starts quietly. Have you ever been the newcomer, the outsider, or the only one in a room? Have you ever felt invisible or out of place, just trying to find your footing? Share your experience in the comments. Your story could be the encouragement someone else needs to keep going. Each morning, Imani arrived at Jefferson Heights Academy before sunrise, hoping the quiet would offer a moment of peace before the day's challenges began. She would unlock her classroom, arrange the desks, and take a deep breath, bracing herself for what awaited beyond those four walls. The school's corridors, lined with motivational posters and student artwork, felt cold and unwelcoming. In staff meetings, Imani's ideas were often met with polite nods but rarely with genuine interest. When she suggested new teaching strategies or shared insights from her own background, the conversation would quickly shift, as if her words carried less weight. "That's an interesting perspective," a colleague would say, before steering the discussion back to familiar territory. Sometimes, her suggestions were later repeated by others and suddenly received with enthusiasm, as if her voice had been invisible. The coded language was ever present. "You're so articulate," one teacher remarked, as if surprised by her eloquence. Another commented, "You must have worked really hard to get here," the implication clear. Even compliments felt loaded, reminders that she was being measured against a different standard. The students, always quick to pick up on the attitudes of adults, mirrored what they saw. Some mimicked her accent or repeated phrases she used in class, turning them into jokes among their friends. Others challenged her authority, questioning her decisions in ways they never did with other teachers. A few students, emboldened by the behavior of their peers, would roll their eyes or sigh loudly when she spoke, making it clear they didn't expect to learn from her. One afternoon, as Imani was writing on the board, she heard laughter behind her. Turning around, she saw a group of students imitating her stance and gestures, their faces twisted in mockery. The sting of humiliation was sharp, but she kept her composure, refusing to let them see her pain. She finished the lesson, her voice steady, but inside, she felt the familiar ache of being singled out. After the final bell, the school emptied quickly. Imani often lingered in her classroom, the silence pressing in as she graded papers and prepared for the next day. The empty desks seemed to echo with the day's slights and whispered jokes. She would sit at her desk, pen in hand, pouring her thoughts into her journal. The pages became a safe space. a place to process the frustration, anger, and sadness that she couldn't show at work. Her entries were raw and honest. She wrote about the exhaustion of always being on guard, the fear of making a mistake, and the loneliness that crept in when the world felt indifferent. She questioned whether she was making a difference, whether her presence was enough to challenge the status quo. Some nights, she lay awake, replaying conversations and wondering if she should have spoken up or let things slide. The late hours took their toll. Imani's friends and family noticed the change in her voice during phone calls. She tried to reassure them, but the strain was hard to hide. Even her karate practice, once a source of strength, felt distant. The discipline and focus she had cultivated over years seemed harder to access in the face of daily hostility. Imani's experience was not unique. Across the country, Black educators often found themselves isolated in schools that claimed to value diversity but struggled to practice it. They faced the burden of representation, expected to be both role models and cultural translators, all while navigating environments that questioned their competence. Conversations with other Black teachers, whether online or at occasional conferences, revealed a shared reality. Stories of being mistaken for support staff, of having their authority undermined, of being asked to handle difficult students because of assumed toughness, these were common threats. The emotional labor was immense, and the risk of burnout was real. Imani drew strength from these connections, even if they were infrequent. Knowing she was not alone helped her push through the hardest days. She reminded herself that her presence mattered, that every small act of resistance was a step toward change, even if progress felt slow. Imani's first steps into the dojo were hesitant, her nerves masked by a determined set to her jaw. The space was simple, mats lined the floor, sunlight filtered through high windows, and the air carried the faint scent of sweat and discipline. The walls were adorned with calligraphy and photographs of students past and present, each one a testament to the journey that began with uncertainty and ended in self-discovery. Master Kwame greeted her with a nod, his presence both calming and commanding. He was a man of few words, but every gesture carried meaning. "You are here to learn, but also to remember who you are," he told her on that first day. The words lingered in Imani's mind long after she left the dojo. Training under Master Kwame was unlike anything Imani had experienced. He demanded focus, respect, and humility. Each lesson began with a bow, a silent promise to honor the space and the people within it. The routines were rigorous, stances, strikes, and blocks repeated until muscle memory took over. Mistakes were met not with frustration, but with patience. "Every fall is a lesson," Master Kwame would say, "and every lesson brings you closer to your true self." Beyond the physical, Master Kwame taught Imani the deeper meaning of strength. He spoke of balance, how true power was not about domination, but about control. Strength is knowing when to act and when to wait. It's standing firm in your values, even when the world tries to shake you. These lessons seeped into every part of Imani's life, shaping her reactions to adversity both inside and outside the dojo. The dojo became Imani's sanctuary. When the world outside felt overwhelming, she found solace in the rhythm of training. The repetition of movements, the sound of her own breath, the steady beat of her heart, these became anchors in a sea of uncertainty. Here, she was not defined by others' expectations. She was simply a student, striving to improve, learning to trust her instincts. Karate offered Imani a way to process her emotions. Anger, frustration, and sadness were channeled into each punch and kick, transformed into focus and determination. The discipline required on the mat spilled over into her daily life. She learned to pause before reacting, to assess situations with clarity, and to respond with intention rather than impulse. Earning her black belt was not a single moment of triumph, but the culmination of years of dedication. The journey was marked by setbacks and breakthroughs, by nights spent practicing alone and days filled with doubt. The final test was grueling, hours of forms, sparring, and demonstration of technique. Master Kwame watched in silence, his gaze steady, his expectations high. When he finally tied the black belt around Imani's waist, it was more than a mark of achievement. It was a recognition of her growth, both as a martial artist and as a person. The belt represented mastery over her body, but also over her fears. It was a reminder that strength is earned, not given, and that true mastery is a lifelong pursuit. The lessons from the dojo became Imani's shield in the face of adversity. When confronted by microaggressions or outright hostility at Jefferson Heights Academy, she drew on the calm she had cultivated through years of training. She learned to stand her ground without aggression, to speak with authority without raising her voice. In moments of conflict, Imani remembered Master Kwame's words, "Control your breath, control your mind." She would pause, center herself, and respond with clarity. This approach often caught others off guard. They expected anger or defensiveness, but instead found a woman who refused to be rattled. Karate also taught Imani the value of community. The bonds formed in the dojo were built on mutual respect and shared struggle. She carried this sense of solidarity into her classroom, striving to create an environment where every student felt seen and valued. She encouraged her students to support one another, to celebrate each other's successes, and to learn from their mistakes. The weeks at Jefferson Heights Academy had been a slow burn. Every day, the pressure on Imani grew heavier. The whispers in the staff lounge, the sidelong glances in the hallways, the student snickers that followed her from classroom to classroom, each one chipped away at her resolve. She kept her head high, but the strain was real. Even the smallest interactions felt loaded. A teacher's offhand remark about fitting in, a parent's pointed question about her teaching style, a student's refusal to participate in class, all reminders that she was being tested, not just as an educator, but as a person. Imani poured her energy into her lessons, determined to reach her students. She decorated her classroom with vibrant posters and quotes from Black leaders, hoping to inspire curiosity and pride. She stayed late, grading papers and planning activities that would engage even the most reluctant learners. But outside her classroom, the climate remained chilly. The sense of being watched, of being measured against an invisible standard, never left her. The tension reached a new level as autumn settled in. The days grew shorter, the air crisp. Imani noticed a shift in the students' behavior. The jokes became bolder, the challenges more direct. Logan, a student known for testing boundaries, began to push harder. He interrupted lessons, made snide comments, and rallied others to join in. His friends followed his lead, their laughter echoing down the halls. One morning, Imani overheard a group of students in the cafeteria. "She thinks she's better than us," one said. "Let's see how tough she really is." The words stung, but Imani refused to let them see her falter. She remembered Master Kwame's advice. When the world tries to shake you, stand even taller. It happened on a Thursday, just after lunch. The hallways buzzed with students moving between classes. Imani was returning to her room, arms full of books, when she heard the familiar sound of Logan's voice. He and his friends blocked the corridor, their faces set in defiance. "Hey, Miss Walker," Logan called out, his tone mocking. "You got a minute? Or are you too busy trying to change everything around here?" Imani paused, her heart pounding. She set her books down, meeting Logan's gaze. The hallway grew quiet as students gathered, sensing something was about to happen. Logan stepped closer, his posture aggressive. "You think you're tough? Prove it." The crowd pressed in, phones raised, eager for drama. Logan's friends egged him on, their voices a chorus of taunts. Imani felt the weight of every eye on her, the expectation that she would either back down or lose control. Imani drew a slow, steady breath. She remembered the countless hours in the dojo, the lessons in discipline and restraint. She looked at Logan, her expression calm but unyielding. "Logan," she said, her voice clear, "I know you're trying to impress your friends, but hurting others doesn't make you strong. It only shows you're afraid to be yourself." Logan sneered, taking another step forward. He reached out, aiming a swat at her shoulder, a move meant to provoke, to test her limits. In one fluid motion, Imani shifted her weight, sidestepping the contact. Her movements were precise, controlled, and effortless. The crowd gasped, surprised by her agility. She didn't retaliate. Instead, she held her ground, her posture relaxed but ready. "I'm not here to fight you," she said, her tone steady. "But I won't let you or anyone else treat me with disrespect." The hallway fell silent. Logan, caught off guard by her composure, hesitated. His bravado faded, replaced by uncertainty. His friends looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. Imani's response was not about showing off her skills. It was about setting a boundary, about demonstrating that strength is not measured by aggression, but by self-control. She stood tall, her presence commanding respect without a single raised voice or clenched fist. A teacher appeared at the end of the hall, drawn by the commotion. The students quickly dispersed, murmuring among themselves. Logan lingered for a moment, then turned and walked away, his confidence shaken. Imani gathered her books, her hands steady. She walked back to her classroom, aware that something had shifted. The students who had witnessed the exchange looked at her with new eyes, some with admiration, others with curiosity, but all with a newfound respect. Word of the incident spread quickly. By the end of the day, everyone at Jefferson Heights Academy had heard about the hallway confrontation. Some students replayed the moment on their phones, marveling at Imani's poise. Others whispered about her secret skills, their tone a mix of awe and disbelief. In the staff lounge, the conversation was more subdued. Some teachers expressed concern about the incident, while others quietly acknowledged the courage it took to stand firm without escalating the situation. The principal called Imani into his office, his expression serious but not unkind. "Ms. Walker," he began, "I heard about what happened. I want to remind you that we value nonviolence and respect, but I also want to thank you for handling a difficult situation with grace." Imani nodded, her voice calm. "Respect is earned, not demanded. I want my students to know that standing up for yourself doesn't mean fighting back. It means refusing to be diminished." In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the school began to change. Students who had once joined in the teasing now greeted Imani with nods or quiet smiles. Some approached her after class, asking about karate, about confidence, about how to handle bullies. Even Logan, once the ringleader, seemed subdued. He avoided eye contact, but the hostility in his posture had faded. Imani continued her work, her resolve stronger than ever. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she had proven, to herself and to everyone watching, that dignity and strength could coexist. Her actions had spoken louder than any words. If you believe in standing up for yourself and others, if you've ever faced a moment where you had to choose between backing down and holding your ground, hit the like button and share this story. Your support helps spread the message that courage and respect can change lives. The day after the hallway confrontation, Imani received a message to meet with Principal Carter. His office, lined with certificates and old yearbooks, felt both official and personal. He gestured for her to sit, his expression thoughtful. "Ms. Walker, I want to talk about what happened yesterday," he began, folding his hands on the desk. "I've heard from several staff members and students. Some are concerned, but most are impressed by how you handled yourself. I want to be clear, our school values nonviolence and open dialogue. At the same time, I recognize that you were put in a difficult position." Imani met his gaze, her voice steady. "I appreciate your support, Mr. Carter. My goal is to create a safe environment for every student. Sometimes that means setting boundaries and showing that respect is not optional." He nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "You've made an impact, Ms. Walker. I hope this can be a turning point for our school." Word of the incident continued to circulate among the faculty. In the staff lounge, the usual cliques and whispered conversations took on a new tone. Some teachers, who had previously kept their distance, now approached Imani with cautious curiosity. One afternoon, Mrs. Evans, a senior English teacher, stopped by Imani's classroom. "I heard about what happened in the hallway," she said, her voice softer than usual. "It takes a lot to stand your ground like that. I wish I'd had that kind of courage when I started here." Others were less direct, but showed their shifting attitudes in small ways. A nod in the hallway, a shared resource, an invitation to join a planning committee. The walls that had once separated Imani from her colleagues began to lower, brick by brick. There were still moments of resistance. Some staff members clung to old habits, reluctant to acknowledge the need for change. But the balance was shifting. The conversation was no longer about whether Imani belonged, but about what the school could learn from her example. A few days later, Mr. Carter invited Imani to join him for coffee in his office. The atmosphere was less formal this time, the conversation more open. "I've been thinking about what you said," he admitted, "about respect and boundaries. I realize now that we haven't always done enough to support new teachers, especially those who bring different perspectives." Imani listened, grateful for his honesty. "It's not just about me," she replied. "It's about creating a culture where everyone feels valued. That means addressing the small things, the jokes, the assumptions, the way we talk about each other." Mr. Carter nodded. "I want to do better. I'd like your help in leading some staff discussions on inclusion and respect. I think your experience could help us grow." Imani agreed, feeling a sense of purpose. This was more than a job. It was a chance to shape the future of the school. The students, too, were changed by what they had witnessed. The story of Imani's calm response spread quickly, becoming a topic of conversation in classrooms and at lunch tables. Some students who had once joined in the teasing now looked at her with new respect. Others, who had always admired her from a distance, found the courage to approach her. One afternoon, a group of students lingered after class. "Ms. Walker, is it true you know karate?" one asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Imani smiled. "Yes, I've been training for a long time. But karate isn't just about fighting. It's about discipline, respect, and knowing how to handle yourself in tough situations." The students listened intently, their skepticism replaced by genuine interest. "Can you teach us?" another asked. "Not just the moves, but how to be confident like you." Imani saw an opportunity. "I'd be happy to share what I've learned. But remember, real strength comes from how you treat others, not just how you defend yourself." As the weeks passed, more students sought out Imani for advice and support. Some came with questions about schoolwork, others with stories of their own struggles. Imani listened, offering guidance and encouragement. She shared lessons from her grandmother, from Master Kwame, and from her own journey. She started an after-school club focused on self-discipline and empowerment. The group met in the gym, where Imani taught basic karate techniques alongside discussions about respect, resilience, and standing up for what's right. The club quickly grew, attracting students from all backgrounds. Imani's influence extended beyond the club. In her classroom, she fostered an environment where every student felt seen and heard. She encouraged open dialogue, celebrated diversity, and challenged her students to think critically about the world around them. The changes at Jefferson Heights Academy were gradual but unmistakable. The school, once defined by its resistance to difference, began to embrace a new sense of community. Staff meetings included honest conversations about inclusion. Students spoke up when they saw unfairness. The culture of silence and conformity gave way to one of respect and growth. Imani's journey was far from over, but she had already left a mark. She had shown that one person's courage could inspire many, that standing up for yourself could open doors for others, and that true respect is built on integrity and compassion. The idea for a karate club began as a quiet hope. After the hallway incident, students' curiosity about Imani's background grew. Some asked about her training, others wanted to know if she could teach them. Imani saw an opportunity to channel this interest into something positive. She approached Mr. Carter with a proposal, an after-school club focused on karate, open to all students, regardless of experience. At first, the suggestion was met with hesitation. Some staff members questioned whether martial arts belonged in a school setting. A few parents voiced concerns about safety and discipline. Even some students were unsure, wondering if the club would be just another activity that fizzled out after a few weeks. But Imani was patient. She explained that karate was not about fighting, but about self-control, respect, and building confidence. She promised to create a space where every student could feel safe and supported. With Mr. Carter's approval, Imani began the process of transforming a corner of the gym into a training area. She brought in mats, hung up a few simple banners, and set clear expectations for behavior and participation. The first meeting drew a small group, some eager, some skeptical, all curious. The early days were challenging. A handful of students showed up, unsure of what to expect. Some came for the novelty, others because they had heard stories about Imani's skills. A few arrived with arms crossed, daring her to impress them. The first sessions focused on basics, stances, breathing, and the importance of respect. Imani emphasized that everyone started as a beginner, and that progress was measured not by how quickly you learned a move, but by how much effort you put in. There were moments of doubt. Some students struggled with the discipline required, chafing at the structure and repetition. Others were embarrassed to make mistakes in front of their peers. Imani encouraged them to support one another, to see each setback as a chance to grow. She shared stories from her own journey, how she had stumbled, how she had learned to get back up, how the dojo had become a place of healing and strength. Slowly, the group began to gel. Students who had never spoken to each other before started to form bonds. They laughed at their missteps, cheered each other on, and celebrated small victories. The skepticism faded, replaced by a sense of belonging. As the weeks passed, the karate club became more than just an after-school activity. It was a refuge, a place where students could leave behind the pressures of school and home and focus on themselves. Imani set the tone from the start. Everyone was welcome, everyone was respected, and everyone had something to contribute. She taught her students that strength was not about overpowering others, but about mastering yourself. Each session began and ended with a bow, a reminder that respect was the foundation of everything they did. Imani encouraged open conversations about challenges, both on and off the mat. Students shared stories of being bullied, of feeling invisible, of struggling to fit in. The club became a space where vulnerability was met with understanding, not judgment. Imani introduced lessons on conflict resolution, self-advocacy, and the importance of community. She invited guest speakers, local leaders, former students, even Master Kwame via video call, to share their experiences. The club's reputation grew, and soon students from all backgrounds wanted to join. The changes in the students were unmistakable. Those who had once been shy or withdrawn began to stand taller, their voices stronger and more confident. Students who had struggled with anger or frustration learned to channel their emotions into focus and discipline. The camaraderie that developed was genuine. Students encouraged each other, celebrated achievements, and offered support during setbacks. One student, Maya, had been quiet and reserved, often sitting alone at lunch. Through the club, she found her voice. She became one of the most dedicated members, helping new students feel welcome and leading warm-ups with pride. Another student, Jamal, had a reputation for getting into trouble. In the dojo, he discovered a sense of purpose and self-control that carried over into his classes and relationships. Parents began to notice the difference. They saw their children becoming more responsible, more respectful, and more engaged. Some reached out to Imani, expressing gratitude for the positive changes they saw at home. Even teachers who had once doubted the value of the club started to see its impact in the classroom. Students were more focused, more cooperative, and more willing to help others. The karate club became a symbol of what was possible when students were given the tools to believe in themselves. It was a place where differences were celebrated, where every member was valued, and where the lessons learned extended far beyond the gym. Imani watched with pride as her students grew, not just in skill, but in character. The club's success inspired other initiatives at Jefferson Heights Academy. Teachers began to collaborate on projects that promoted inclusion and respect. Students organized events to celebrate diversity and support one another. The sense of unity that began in the dojo spread throughout the school, creating a culture of empowerment and mutual support. Imani knew that the journey was ongoing, that there would always be challenges to face. But she also knew that the seeds of change had taken root. The dojo in the classroom was more than a club. It was a movement, a testament to the power of resilience, and a reminder that every student has the potential to rise. The transformation at Jefferson Heights Academy did not go unnoticed. As the months passed, the school's atmosphere shifted from guarded to open. Students who once kept to their own circles began to collaborate across lines that had previously divided them. Teachers who had been skeptical of new approaches now worked together to create lessons that reflected the diversity of their classrooms. The sense of unity and respect that began in Imani's dojo spread throughout the building, touching every corner of the school. Word of these changes reached the wider community. Parents spoke at PTA meetings about the positive differences they saw in their children: greater confidence, improved focus, and a willingness to stand up for what was right. Local leaders visited the school, eager to see the karate club in action and to learn more about the new programs that were fostering inclusion and growth. Soon, other schools in the district began to take notice. Principals and teachers from neighboring campuses reached out to Imani, asking for advice on how to start similar clubs and create safe spaces for their own students. Some invited her to observe their classrooms and offer feedback. The district superintendent visited Jefferson Heights Academy, impressed by the changes and eager to replicate the model elsewhere. The local media caught wind of the story. A reporter from the city newspaper attended a karate club session, capturing the energy and camaraderie among the students. The article that followed highlighted not just the physical skills being taught, but the deeper lessons of respect, discipline, and empowerment. Soon, radio stations and community blogs were sharing Imani's story, sparking conversations about the importance of representation and the power of one person to inspire change. These conversations led to real policy shifts. The school board began to prioritize diversity training for staff and encourage the creation of student-led initiatives focused on inclusion. New guidelines were introduced to address bullying and support students from all backgrounds. The ripple effect of Imani's work was felt far beyond the walls of her own classroom. Imani's influence continued to grow. She was invited to speak at education conferences, where she shared her experiences and the lessons she had learned. Her workshops focused on practical strategies for building inclusive communities, fostering resilience, and empowering students to become leaders in their own right. At each event, educators and administrators listened closely, taking notes and asking questions. Imani's message was clear: real change begins with small, consistent actions. She encouraged others to look for opportunities to support those who felt isolated, to challenge assumptions, and to create environments where every voice mattered. Her story inspired others to take action. Teachers returned to their schools with renewed purpose, determined to make a difference. Students who heard her speak felt seen and understood, many for the first time. The impact of Imani's work was best captured in the words of those she had touched. One student wrote, "Ms. Walker taught me that I don't have to hide who I am. I can be strong and kind at the same time." A parent shared, "My daughter comes home excited to talk about what she learned in the club. She's more confident and willing to try new things." A colleague reflected, "Imani's presence challenged me to rethink my own biases. I'm grateful for her honesty and her example." If you believe in the power of resilience and transformation, and you want to hear more stories like Imani's, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement, and let us know in the comments how you've seen positive change in your own community. Together, we can keep the ripple going. Long after the halls of Jefferson Heights Academy had emptied and the city lights flickered outside her window, Imani often found herself at her desk, pen in hand. The quiet of the night offered space to process the day's events. Her journal, filled with entries both raw and hopeful, became a trusted companion. She wrote about the challenges she faced, the moments of doubt, and the small victories that kept her moving forward. Some nights, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. She wondered if she was truly making a difference, if her efforts were enough to shift the culture of a place so set in its ways. Yet, as she turned the pages of her journal, she saw evidence of growth not just in her students, but in herself. Each entry was a reminder that progress is rarely linear, but every step matters. Imani's journey had taught her that strength is not defined by physical power alone. The lessons from the dojo, discipline, patience, and self-control, were just as important outside the gym as they were on the mat. True strength, she realized, is found in the ability to remain steady in the face of adversity, to respond with dignity when challenged, and to hold on to hope even when the path is uncertain. She reflected on the wisdom passed down from her grandmother and Master Kwame. Their words echoed in her mind: stand tall, even when you feel small. Let your actions speak for you. Remember that every challenge is an opportunity to grow. These lessons became the foundation of her teaching, guiding her interactions with students, colleagues, and the wider community. Imani saw the impact of her work in the faces of her students. She watched as they grew more confident, more willing to speak up, and more supportive of one another. The dojo in the gym was no longer just a club. It was a symbol of what could happen when people believed in themselves and each other. Parents and teachers noticed the change, too. The school felt different, more welcoming, more alive. She understood that her story was not just about overcoming obstacles, but about building something lasting. The legacy she was creating was one of hope, resilience, and the belief that every person has the power to shape their own future. As Imani closed her journal each night, she carried a quiet conviction. Every act of self-empowerment, no matter how small, can spark change. One person's courage can inspire a classroom, a school, even a community. The journey is ongoing, and the work is never finished, but every step forward matters. To anyone listening, Imani's story is a reminder that strength is not just about standing up for yourself. It's about lifting others as you rise. When you choose resilience, dignity, and hope, you become a force for transformation. And in doing so, you help create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive.